My name is Ryan Miller, and what I am about to write happened last Halloween. I am 23, and I still live at home while I finish classes at a community college. So I was the one stuck passing out candy while my parents went to a costume party across town. It was one of those weirdly warm October nights. The sky was clear, the street was full of kids, and our porch light was a steady beacon for every plastic bucket in a 3-block radius. My parents left around 7:30, my mom reminding me 3 different times to keep the front door locked between groups and to ignore anyone who looked sketchy. I laughed and told her it was just Halloween, that the creeps usually hid behind the decorations. The first couple of hours were normal. Little kids with their parents, teenagers in the kind of lazy costumes that are just hoodies and face paint, the usual. I kept the storm door open and the main door cracked, left a scary movie playing on low volume in the living room, and scrolled my phone between doorbell rings. Around 9, the rush died down. The street emptied out, except for a few stragglers and the teenagers who were clearly out just to cause trouble. That was when I saw him. He was standing on the sidewalk at the far end of our yard, just beyond the reach of the porch light. He wore a cheap plastic skull mask, the kind you can get from any drugstore, and a dark hoodie with the hood up. No costume beyond that, no candy bag, just standing. I remember thinking he was probably waiting for friends, so I looked away. When the doorbell rang a minute later, I opened the door without checking the peephole. It was a group of 3 kids with their dad. As I handed them candy, I glanced over their shoulders out toward the sidewalk. The skull mask was closer. He was at the corner of our driveway now, still standing there with his hands in his pockets. He did not come up with the group, did not say trick or treat, did not move at all. He just watched. When I finished with the kids, I shut the door completely and turned the deadbolt, telling myself I was being dramatic. 10 minutes went by. No more doorbell, no more kids. The movie in the background reached a loud jump scare and made me flinch, so I muted it. That was when I heard it. A soft scrape against the front door, like fingers dragging lightly over the wood. I froze and stared at the door. The doorbell did not ring. Whoever it was did not knock. The scraping sound continued for a few seconds, then stopped. I got up slowly and went to the peephole. The porch looked empty. I debated opening the door just to prove to myself that it was nothing, but my mom's voice was in my head about ignoring sketchy people. Instead, I looked through the narrow window beside the door, angling myself so I could see the front yard without being obvious. The skull mask was at the bottom of the porch steps now, looking straight at the door. There was still no candy bag, no friends, nothing. Just this man, standing completely still, breathing slow enough that his chest barely moved. I backed away from the door and grabbed my phone. No text from my parents. I pulled up the front door camera feed from the security app. The angle was wider and showed the driveway too. There he was, centered in the frame, head tilted slightly like he was listening. I thought about calling the non-emergency line to say there was some guy loitering, but it felt dumb. It was Halloween, after all. Maybe he was waiting for a ride. Maybe he was just socially awkward. Then he stepped out of frame. The motion alert on my phone chimed again a moment later, this time from the side yard camera. I switched to it and my stomach dropped. He was walking along the side of the house, away from the front door, toward the gate that led to our backyard. We never get trick-or-treaters around back. There is no reason for anyone to be there. I hurried through the kitchen and locked the back door, even though it was probably already locked. The porch light over the back deck was off, so when I looked through the glass panel in the door, all I saw was my faint reflection. I flicked the light on. Empty deck, closed gate. No one there. I turned the lock again for good measure and walked back to the living room. As I passed the hallway, something made me stop. My bedroom was halfway down the hall, and I could see the door from where I stood. It was open. I never leave it open. I always leave it pulled almost shut so the cat can nudge it. The cat was asleep on the couch. I tried to reason with myself. Maybe I had left it that way earlier. Maybe I was mixing it up with last night. I took a few steps down the hall and called out, "Silence." The house felt wrong in a way I cannot explain. Too quiet, like the walls were holding their breath. I decided this was stupid and that I was letting a plastic mask get to me. I pushed my bedroom door the rest of the way open and hit the light. My room looked normal, except for one thing. The curtain by the window was moving slightly, like it had just been brushed by a hand. The window itself was locked, but there were faint smears higher up on the glass, as if someone had pressed their fingers there and slid them down. There was still a faint fog from the warmth inside, meeting the cold outside. I backed out of the room and went straight to the kitchen, finally dialing the non-emergency number. While I waited through the automated menu, the motion alert chimed again. Front door camera. I opened the app. The skull mask was back on the porch, this time right up against the door. He was so close, the camera caught the plastic texture of the mask. He lifted his hand and tried the knob. When it did not move, he just stood there. The operator came on, and I tried to sound calm. As I explained, there was a man in a mask trying my doors and walking around the house. She told me officers were on the way and to stay inside. While I was still on the line, he stepped away from the door and moved out of frame. A second later, the side camera triggered. He headed back toward the gate. The operator stayed with me and asked if there was any way into the house from the backyard. I told her there was a sliding door that led into the den and that it was locked. I was almost sure it was locked. She told me to go to a room with a lock and stay there. I went to the hallway bathroom since it was the only room with no windows. As I passed the den, I could not help looking. Through the glass of the sliding door, I saw his silhouette on the deck. He was standing almost nose to glass, head tilted in that same curious way, like he was trying to see inside. Then his hand rose, and I watched the lock on the sliding door twitch, just barely, like he was testing it. The bathroom felt like a closet. I sat on the edge of the tub, phone pressed to my ear, listening. The operator kept talking in a calm voice, telling me the officers were turning onto my street. She asked if I could hear anything. At first I could not, and then I did. A soft, steady dragging sound above me. The attic entrance was in the hallway ceiling, just outside the bathroom. I realized with a sick feeling that it had not been fully closed since my dad got down the decorations earlier. There were 2 knocks on the front door and a muffled shout of police. The dragging sound stopped. My whole body went cold. I opened the bathroom door and moved into the hallway as the officers let themselves in. One of them called out my name and I answered. They met me halfway down the hall, saw my face, and checked the rooms. When they pulled down the attic ladder, there were fresh footprints in the dust on the attic floor. The path stopped right above my bedroom. There was a footprint near the edge of the opening, like whoever had been up there had been looking down through the small gap at the hallway, at me. They swept the house and the yard, but there was no one. The backyard gate was unlatched, swaying slightly. The officers said all they could do was file a report and told me I did the right thing by calling. My parents came home to flashing blue and red lights and a version of me they had never seen, shaking and pale, and absolutely certain that if I had opened that front door even once while he was right there, he would have come in. For weeks after, every time I heard the house creak at night, I pictured that cheap plastic skull looking down through the attic opening, listening to me move. Halloween used to be my favorite holiday. Now when I see kids in masks on our porch, all I can think about is the man who did not want candy and did not say trick or treat. He just wanted to see what was inside the house. This story is written in the style of real-life night shift and home intrusion accounts collected in true horror testimonies. My name is Mark Carter, and the night this happened was Halloween 3 years ago. I was 25 and working for a delivery app to make extra money. It was an easy way to kill a few hours after my day job, and the holiday always meant good tips. People liked tipping drivers who brought candy with the food, and I kept a bag in the passenger seat just for that. Around 10 that night, the rush had finally slowed down. I had only one more delivery on my queue. The address was a house on the edge of a quiet neighborhood near the woods. I had been there once before for a grocery drop-off, but it was during daylight and nothing about it had stood out. It was just a small single-story house with a blue porch light that flickered sometimes. When I turned down the street, I noticed how dark the houses looked. No decorations, no kids lingering on sidewalks, Not even a sound except the rumble of my engine. Halloween was basically over at that point, but the silence felt heavier than usual. My GPS told me to stop at the house with the blue light, so I pulled into the short driveway. The light was on, but flickering faster than I remembered. It cast these weird shadows across the porch that made the railing look bent. I grabbed the fast food order and walked up the steps. Before I knocked, I saw something taped to the door, a handwritten note on lined paper. "Leave the food and do not knock. Please, no noise." I figured it was for a sleeping baby, or maybe someone with a night shift. It was strange though, because the handwriting looked shaky, like the person was in a hurry. I set the bag down on the little outdoor table and took a picture for proof. When I turned to go back to my car, I paused. The blue light wasn't just flickering, it was dimming and then brightening in this slow pulse, almost like it was reacting to something inside the house. I shook it off and walked down the steps. When I reached the bottom, I heard something behind me, a soft tap on the window next to the door. I turned my head just enough to see movement behind the curtain. Someone was standing there. I could see the outline of a head pressed close to the glass, like they were watching me. I waited a second to see if they would open the door. They didn't. The curtain twitched like a hand brushed against it. I called out that the food was on the table. No answer. I got into my car and closed the door. The blue light flickered again, but this time it buzzed like it was straining. Right then, my phone chimed with a message from the app. Customer reported missing item. Return to door. My stomach dropped. I had just left the bag exactly as ordered. I looked back at the table. The bag was still there, untouched. The curtain moved again, this time slower, like someone was sliding their hand down the fabric from the inside. I didn't want to go back up there, but the app required proof if the customer made a complaint. I got out of the car reluctantly and started back up the steps. Halfway there, I stopped. The blue light went completely out. The entire porch vanished into darkness. I reached for my phone to turn the flashlight on. Before I could switch it on, the porch light burst back to life at full brightness, revealing something I had not noticed before. The front door was open an inch, just barely. I had not heard it. I had not seen anyone touch it. But there it was, cracked open like someone had been waiting for me to return. I said the food was there again. My voice sounded too loud, too tense. The gap in the doorway widened by the smallest amount, like a slow inhale. I stepped back. The air inside the house was cold. I could feel it, even from where I stood. Then something slid into view behind the door. A hand. Thin, pale. The fingers curled around the edge of the door but did not push it open all the way. Just held it, waiting. I stepped down one step, then another. The hand didn't move. My phone buzzed again. Another message. Do not leave. That wasn't from the app. It was a text message. No caller ID. Just those words. Do not leave. I looked toward the window to see if the silhouette was still there. The curtain was perfectly still. The window was empty. I made the decision right then. I was done. I backed down the steps, keeping my eyes on the door the whole time. The hand slowly slipped back out of sight. The door gently eased shut, like someone was careful not to make a sound. When I reached my car, I locked the doors immediately and started the engine. As my headlights lit the porch, I saw something that made my skin crawl. The food bag was gone. The table was empty. The blue porch light flickered twice, then turned off completely. I drove away without looking back. The app tried to send me another message, saying the customer needed assistance, but I ignored it. When I got home, I checked the text message again. The number was listed as unknown, with no metadata at all. The next day, I reported the address to the dispatch office and told them there was something wrong there. They removed it from the delivery list without asking questions, which only made me more uneasy. 2 weeks later, out of curiosity or stupidity, I drove past the house on my way to another drop. The blue porch light was gone. The house was dark. The driveway was empty. A faded sign was posted in the yard. Vacant property. Do not enter. According to the date on the sign, it had been marked vacant 6 months before Halloween. Whoever I delivered to that night was not supposed to be inside that house. And when I think about that hand gripping the door and the whisper soft tapping on the window, I still wonder if the person was watching the street long before I pulled up or if they had just been waiting inside that empty house for the first person willing to walk onto the porch. My name is Daniel Morris, and the Halloween I'm about to talk about happened when I was 26. I had recently moved into a small rental house in a quiet neighborhood outside Dayton. I barely knew any of the neighbors, but the area felt calm enough, and my landlord told me it was a good place for young people starting out. What he did not mention was the garage. It was detached from the house with old weathered siding and a single light above the door that barely worked. The landlord had told me not to store anything important in there because the roof leaked. I kept a few boxes on shelves and that was about it. Halloween night was my first time home early in weeks. I turned off my porch light after the last trick-or-treaters left around 9 and settled on the couch with leftover candy and a cheap slasher movie. I was still adjusting to how quiet the neighborhood got after dark, and every creak of the house made me sit up a little straighter. Around 10:30, I heard something outside. It was faint and quick, like a small impact. At first, I thought a kid had thrown an egg or a rock at the house. But when I checked the windows, everything looked clean. That was when I noticed the garage light was on. It should not have been. I had turned it off earlier when I grabbed a broom. The bulb was old and dim, but from the living room window, I could see the weak yellow glow. The garage door faced the side yard, not the street, so no one walking by would have a reason to go over there. I told myself it was probably a sensor glitch, or maybe I had forgotten to turn it off. I watched it for a full minute. The light flickered once, then steadied. Something about it felt wrong. I grabbed a jacket and stepped outside. The air had that cold snap you only get at the end of October. The yard was quiet. Not a sound except a distant dog and the leaves scraping across the sidewalk. As I got closer to the garage, I slowed down. The door was closed, but something dark was on the ground right in front of it. I used my phone light. It was a small plastic pumpkin bucket, the kind kids use for candy. It was cracked on one side and empty. I checked the street. No kids, no cars, no movement at all. I picked it up and set it on a shelf inside the garage without thinking. The smell inside hit me immediately. Damp wood, old boxes, and something else underneath. Something sour. I checked the corners for raccoon droppings or a dead mouse, but saw nothing. I pulled the cord to shut the light off. As soon as it went dark, I heard it. A small, quick breath. Not mine. I froze with my hand still on the cord. The sound had come from the back of the garage, near the old workbench. I stayed completely still, letting my eyes adjust to the dark. After a few seconds, I could make out shapes, the shelves, the ladder, the boxes. Nothing moved. I told myself it was the wind pushing through a gap in the wall. I stepped backward until I was outside again and pulled the door mostly shut behind me. I did not close it all the way because it always stuck and made a loud crack. I just lowered it enough that it looked closed. I walked back to the house and locked the door. 5 minutes later, as I passed the kitchen window, I glanced outside. The garage light was on again. This time the door was open 6 inches. My chest tightened. I grabbed my phone and zoomed in through the glass. There was a shape near the bottom of the opening, small and crouched, like a kid sitting with their knees pulled up. I could not see a face, just a dark outline. I called out through the window, asking if someone was hurt. The shape shifted back into the shadows. I could not tell if it was backing away or just settling lower. I hesitated. Some part of me felt like I should call someone, but the idea of explaining it made me feel stupid. Maybe it was some kid hiding from a prank gone wrong. Maybe he was scared. I stepped outside again, but stayed on the porch. I said if anyone needed help, they could come out. No response. The garage light flickered again. I walked down the steps slowly, forcing my breathing to stay steady. As I approached the garage, the shape moved. Not away from me, but sideways, sliding deeper inside like it was trying to stay hidden. I reached the door and pulled it open just enough to shine my phone light through. The beam scanned across the clutter. Empty shelves, old tools, a broken chair. When the light hit the back wall, my heart dropped. There was a boy standing there, maybe 10 or 11. His clothes were dirty, his hair matted, his eyes too wide. He did not look scared. He looked exhausted, like he had been awake for days. I asked where he lived. He didn't answer. He just stared at me. I told him he shouldn't be in here, that I could call someone for him. He stepped forward into the light, and that was when I realized something wasn't right. His shoes were soaked, completely soaked, dripping onto the concrete, but it hadn't rained in 2 days. The smell I had noticed earlier got stronger, damp earth and something metallic. I asked again if he needed help. He blinked slowly and finally spoke. His voice was quiet and hoarse. "Someone is coming." A cold wave went through me. I asked who. He did not answer. He just looked toward the side door of the garage that led into the backyard. Then I heard footsteps outside, heavy and slow, breaking through leaves. The boy backed into the corner, shaking his head at me like he wanted me to hide too. The footsteps got closer. Whoever it was, wasn't rushing. They were taking their time, like they already knew exactly where they were going. I whispered that we had to go. The boy shook his head again. His eyes were locked on the side door. The footsteps stopped right outside it. A long breath pushed against the door from the other side. Not a kid, not a teenager, an adult. The doorknob turned. I didn't wait. I grabbed the boy's wrist to pull him toward the main door, but he yanked away with surprising force and ran deeper into the garage. I had no choice. I bolted out the main door and sprinted to the house. Once inside, I locked everything and called the police. When they arrived 10 minutes later, the garage was empty. No boy, no footprints, no sign of forced entry on the side door. But the officer did notice something I had missed. The small plastic pumpkin bucket I had put on the shelf was gone. He checked the backyard with his flashlight and found it lying near the fence, cracked open again. There were fresh, wet footprints leading away from it. Small ones, then a set of larger ones trailing behind. They stopped at the tree line. They never found the boy. They never found whoever had been with him. And sometimes late at night, when the wind shifts and the yard goes quiet, I swear I hear that garage light click on even though I remove the bulb the next morning. My name is Travis Bennett, and the Halloween I'm about to tell you about happened when I was 24. I had the late shift at a small 24-hour pharmacy on the edge of town. It was the kind of place that never had customers after 10, except for people picking up last-minute cold medicine or teenagers trying to buy energy drinks. Halloween night was usually busier, but that year a storm was supposed to roll in, so the streets went dead early. My coworker closed out the front register and left around 9:45. I was alone until midnight. By 10:30, the store felt like a cave. The hum of the refrigerators and the occasional pop in the ceiling were the only sounds. I kept myself busy restocking shelves and checking expiration dates just so I wouldn't have to stand still and listen to the empty aisles. At 11:17, the motion sensor near aisle 8 chimed. I looked up at the monitor behind the counter. Someone had walked in. It was a woman, tall, wearing a long black coat and no costume. Her hair was straight and hung over her shoulders. What struck me first was that she didn't look around. Most people scan the aisles or head straight toward the pharmacy window. She walked slowly down the center walkway like she already knew where everything was. I said the usual greeting, but she didn't acknowledge it. She didn't look at me at all. She moved down aisle 2, then 3, then 5, never picking anything up, never turning her head. Around 11:25, I watched her on the monitor again. She was standing perfectly still in front of the cold medicine section. Her head was tilted forward just a little. Her arms were hanging straight down. It looked like she was staring at the floor. I walked over to check if she needed help. When I stepped into the aisle, she turned to look at me. That was the moment everything in me tightened. She wasn't blinking. Not slow blinking or barely blinking. She wasn't blinking at all. Her eyes were wide, like she was surprised to see me, but her face stayed blank. I asked if she was okay. She didn't answer. She just kept staring, unblinking, breathing shallowly, like she was trying not to make noise. I told her the pharmacy counter was closed for the night, but I could help her find something. Still nothing. Then she raised her hand slowly, like she was pointing to something behind me. I turned to look, but the shelf was empty, except for allergy pills and cough drops. When I faced her again, she was closer, a foot away from me now. I didn't hear her move. Her eyes were huge in the low fluorescent light, and still she didn't blink. I stepped back and tried to keep my voice steady. I asked again if she needed something, or if she wanted me to call someone. She opened her mouth like she was about to speak. No sound came out at first. Then she whispered something so quietly I almost didn't catch it. "He's here." I asked who she meant. She didn't move, didn't blink, didn't change the expression on her face. She just repeated it. "He's here." The way she said it made my chest tighten. I glanced behind me because I suddenly felt watched from both directions. The aisle was empty. The store was empty. We were the only two people there. Or at least I thought we were. The motion sensor chimed again. ASL 6. I turned toward the front counter because I could see the monitors from there. When I reached them and looked at the screens, my stomach dropped. There was a man standing at the far end of aisle 6. I hadn't heard the door. I hadn't heard footsteps. But he was there, standing between shelves of cereal and cleaning products, with his back slightly turned like he was listening to something. I checked the door from where I stood. The bell hadn't rung. The door hadn't opened. It was locked like it always was after 11. I looked back at the monitor. The man was gone. Then the chime sounded again. AL 8. I felt the pressure in the store shift like someone was breathing in the wrong place. The woman in the black coat appeared at the end of the aisle in real time, not on the monitor. She hadn't made a sound. She didn't blink as she walked toward the counter. Her shoes barely touched the floor. I asked her if the man she mentioned earlier was with her. She shook her head slowly. Once. Then, she pointed toward the medicine aisles. "He followed me." Her voice cracked like she was exhausted. I asked when she noticed him. She said nothing. She stared at me with those wide, unblinking eyes, like she was waiting for me to understand something she couldn't explain. Then something crashed near aisle 8. A hard plastic clatter that echoed through the store. I jumped. She didn't. She just kept staring at me, still not blinking. I grabbed the phone to call the police, but before I could finish dialing, she whispered one more thing. "Don't look for him." Another crash. This time closer. Something metal hit the floor. I ducked behind the counter and told her to go into the employee area with me. She didn't move. She stayed standing in front of the counter like she was frozen or refusing to leave that spot. I reached out to pull her behind the counter. When my hand touched her sleeve, she finally blinked once and stepped back like she had just woken up. Footsteps echoed down aisle 7. Slow, heavy, not rushed. More like someone searching each shelf one by one. I dialed 911. My hands were shaking so badly, I almost dropped the phone. I told the operator someone was in the store who wasn't supposed to be there. She told me to lock myself in a room until officers arrived. I turned to tell the woman to follow me. She was gone. Completely gone. I checked the front doors. Still locked. Checked the aisles. Empty. No sound at all. The footsteps had stopped. When the police arrived, they swept the store aisle by aisle. They found nothing except a box of cold medicine on the floor in aisle 8 and a single wet footprint near the back door. The back door had been locked from the inside, but the deadbolt was twisted slightly like someone had tried to force it quietly. They asked me to describe the man. I told them I only saw a shape. They asked about the woman. I told them everything. They checked the cameras. She wasn't on them. Not once. Not entering. Not walking the aisles. Not standing in front of me. But the cold medicine hitting the floor, the crash, the boxes falling, all of that was on tape. And right before the crash, the camera in aisle 8 flickered. And for a single frame, there was a dark shape standing at the end of the aisle. Taller than the shelves. Facing the wrong direction. Nothing else. I didn't sleep for 2 days after that. And even now, sometimes when I'm alone in a store late at night, I catch myself checking whether the people around me blink.